Yo, Merry Christmas, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Off the Shelf. I am your host, Running Time HD, and this week, what we found off the shelf was...
Watch out!
And this Christmas, you better believe in Santa, or he'll slay you.
Merry Christmas, Frank.
Christmas Evil.
Christmas Evil, originally titled You Better Watch Out. It was released in 1980. It was written and directed by Lewis Jackson, starring Brandon Maggart. I'm very sorry, I did not pronounce any of that correctly, I assume. This film is also said to be the greatest Christmas movie by the legendary John Waters. And while I would not go that far, I will say it is a hell of a good time. And as you can tell by the season and by the cover and the name, it is a Christmas horror film. Kind of. It's a horror film, but it's also kind of like, not in a traditional sense. Like, by the way the film is titled, and the year it came out, and the whole, like, you know, thing with it being, like, exploitation cinema, being a video nasty, you expect it to be, well, yeah, I didn't mention that, it's a video nasty, too. You kind of expect it to be a bit more, you know, crass, maybe a bit more, taboo, but it really isn't. There are some, like, slight sexual stuff in there, but it's pretty tame, all things considered. And there is blood and a little bit of gore, but again, not too bad. I think most rated R films these days are way more gratuitous. But I think mainly the reason it was in the video nasties is because of its subject matter, of the protagonist being a bit of the film itself being a character study of the main protagonist, Harry, who is Brandon Maggart. Again, I'm very sorry I did not pronounce that correctly. It's kind of a study on, I guess, he had a traumatic experience as a kid. You know, his dad pretended to be Santa, right? And then he's like, his brother, who we see later in the film, his younger brother, you know, is like, oh, that wasn't Santa, that was our dad, that's fucking stupid. I'm like 10 years old, I'm too old for Santa. Get the fuck out of here. Right, you know, like kids are like, they think they're cool when they don't believe in Santa. That's essentially what he was doing. And then he's like, well, that was Santa. I know it was Santa, right? It couldn't have been our dad. This and that. And then he went downstairs and the dad and the mom were doing stuff, right? Nothing too bad. There wasn't even any nudity. It wasn't that bad. But it still was bad for a child. And he couldn't take it. So he got him trauma, and now he has a vendetta to, you know, bring back the tradition of Christmas, to bring back the Christmas spirit and weed out a few bad eggs, essentially. But he's also incredibly, you know, I don't mean to be rude, but a little bit insane, and he thinks he's actually Santa Claus. Like, he doesn't, like, want to be the embodiment of Santa Claus. He thinks he's Santa Claus. And, like, he wants to, you know, he thinks he can go down chimneys, and he thinks, like, he's, like, putting gifts under trees and shit, and he's, like, he has a list. He has, like, there's a naughty and nice book, but one of them's labeled 80, and there's, like, all these numbered books, so he's been, like, you know, he's making a list, and he's checking it twice, right? He's got a naughty and nice list on his shelf, a fucking whole shelf full of it, and 50, like, I think at the beginning of the movie, 58 days, or 55 days before Christmas, his entire house is just filled with, like, Christmas memorabilia, just everywhere. The guy is a little step above obsessed with Santa Claus and Christmas, right? But the thing is, he's not, I mean, the film is called Christmas Evil, and I guess he is, because he does murder 4 people, but I mean, that's just water under the bridge. I mean, come on, it's fine, murdering 4 people, it's no big D. But, he really is trying to help the kids, you know? I mean, he doesn't hurt any of the kids. He never does. I mean, it looks like he is with one of the naughty kids, but he kind of just, like, scares him a little bit. Like, he doesn't actually hurt him or like, even grab him. He just kind of spooks him a little bit. Was he going to hurt him? I don't know, actually. It is kind of left up in the air. But the whole film, he's kind of empathetic. You can kind of empathize with him because, I mean, he's clearly not very well mentally, and, you know, clearly the people around him didn't care, and he loves Christmas, and, you know, he works at a toy shop, but nobody at the toy shop actually cares about the toys. They're all cheap plastic crap, and he's the only one that wants the toys to be quality. And, by the way, when I'm going to say this, these are the movie's words and not mine. They were going to give toys to the retarded children at a hospital for said children. Again, not my words. I'm not trying to be insensitive. It was 1980. Those are the movie's words. Okay. And he's, you know, he's like, he wants to, you know, help the kids. That's what he wants to do. But, of course, the toy companies, they just think about profits. And they think about, like, margins and stuff. They only think about the numbers. They don't actually think about what makes the kids happy. They don't care about that. That's just, like, you know, I guess something on the side that's a bit of a positive for their PR, right? They don't care. But he cares. And he wants to, like, kill the CEO, right? Because he's evil and taking advantage of Christmas, like the corporatization of Christmas, you know, because that's obviously a thing, right? I guess the capitalistic takeover of Christmas, where, you know, you gotta go to shop, you gotta buy these things, you gotta get gifts, you gotta get that, spend money, stuff like that. It kind of touches on that, and how Harry wants, like, traditional Christmas values. You know, like, be good, listen to your parents, this and that. Like, you know, you'll be good, you'll get presents, but they want the presents to be quality, I guess is what he said. He wants the kids to be happy, as I've been saying. He wants them to be happy. And, you know, he gives kids presents the whole second half, while he's also murdering some people at the same time. Right? But one thing is, the whole thing is actually very well done. I very do much like that. It's very well shot. It's actually very well put together. I don't really know why the director and writer... Well, actually, I kind of do. This is his last film. This was his last ever film that he ever directed, he ever wrote. This is his last one. And I'm kind of sad about that, because I think this film was very well done on a lot of areas. So I kind of wished he had made more movies. But also, I can kind of understand why he didn't want to make any more movies after this, because he said that, for one, he had, in, like, 1970 or so, around that time, he had the idea of the film, right? And he had gone through, like, 10 years of trying to find someone to fund it, right? And then they funded it, and he made the movie, and originally it was only going to be, like, a $450,000 budget, right? But it shot up to $850,000, right? And he spent a lot of it, and people at the time didn't like it. A lot of people were, like, shitting on it. Critics didn't like it. It has gotten a bit of a cult following these days, but at the time, a lot of people didn't like it. And then there was a bunch of distribution problems, like, so the original company that was distributing it, I think Canon distributed a VHS, like, video release of it at some point, but maybe after maybe it was Canon, probably not, or maybe it was, because they went bankrupt, and they, you know, dissipated, and Troma, who I'm sure you're familiar with if you're familiar with underground cinema, they had acquired the rights to it, kind of, but they weren't really truthful with Lewis Jackson on what they did. They kind of implied to him that they had the full rights, or something similar to that, and they didn't really give him the details on what they were actually going to do, and they did stuff that he didn't like. So essentially they had released the film under the guise of, oh, it's the director's cut. This is how Lewis Jackson intended the film to be. And then he came out and was like, that's not how I wanted the film to be. Right? Because they had deleted scenes that had never been in previous releases, but he didn't like those scenes, and that's why they were cut out. Right? He didn't like those scenes, so he just excluded them. There's a reason deleted scenes exist, right? Some of them aren't just to cut time. Maybe the writer or the director just doesn't like the scene, right? And maybe it just doesn't fit with the movie, and he did not like the Troma release. He described it as they had approached the rubble of the bankrupted company, and they just took whatever was there, right? Oh, and that's a pretty good way to put it. But with that being said, I'm talking about this film, and it sounds really serious. And the first half is, right? It's a very well-built... You know, obviously, I was complaining a little bit in the first half because it was a little slow-paced, and I think I was expecting the film to be something else than what it was. And now that I think I've had some time to think on it, I liked what the film was, but in the moment, I was a little disappointed because it wasn't what I expected it to be. But now, I like it more thinking on it. But in the first half, it's very serious. In the second half, it's ridiculous, right? It's just plain ridiculous. That's when he becomes Santa. He gets the fake beard. He, like, glues it onto his face. And he, like, makes his own Santa suit. He, you know, sews it together. He does all that. And then, like, the film just goes off the rails from that point. So, at first, you know, he's just doing Santa stuff. He's giving away toys to, you know, the sick children. He's given, you know, he's having fun. He went to, like, an office Christmas party and, like, did Santa things. But then, he starts doing, like, the evil Santa thing. So he goes to the church, because, like, I think a lot of people, you know, a lot of the adults are at the church, and the CEO is at the church, and he wants to kill the evil, like, CEO of the toy company, because, you know, he's ruining the spirit of Christmas. But, of course, there are some people who are being, like, assholes, and they got in his way, so he jams a fucking toy soldier, like, thing. It was, like, had a blade, and he fucking stuck it into one of the dude's eyes, which is the goriest thing in the movie. And it was quick, like, it was, like, kind of hard to notice. Like, not hard to notice, but it goes by quick. And then he fucking gets made a Christmas axe. It looked kind of like a candy cane or something, and it had, like, teeth on it. He made, like, a custom fucking hatchet, and then he just hatches 2 other people in the head, and then he drives off in his custom van with a sleigh on it, right? And then he goes, so this is one of the, I think the funniest thing is at the end of the movie, but I'll get to that. I just want to talk about the funny shit, because that's some of my favorite parts of the movie. So then he tries to go into the house of somebody, I think it's somebody he works with, and he wants to kill him, right, because he's evil, corporate, like I've been saying. So he goes up, and he initially tries to go through the chimney, because he genuinely believes he's Santa, right? And so when he tries to go down the chimney, of course, in real life, you can't fucking do that. Chimneys are way too small and compact. And there have been cases of people who go through chimneys that die because they get stuck and they suffocate, right? Because you can't go down it or up a chimney, right? It's too dangerous. So he tries, and then he just kind of gets stuck up there. So he's just kind of like wiggling around, and there's like a wide shot of him just going, ugh. He's just like trying to get out of the thing, and there's like snow coming down. It's like silence too. It's just really funny. And then he gets out, and then they just left the basement window unlocked, so he goes through there. And eventually he starts putting gifts under the tree for the children, right? But then he goes into the bedroom of the guy, right? And the guy, he opens his eyes, he notices him, and instead of being like scared or shocked, he's like, Harry? He's like just confused, like, what are you doing here, man? And he's like, I don't remember what he said, but it was funny. And then he tries to smother him to death with his toy sack, which is funny because I don't think that's how that works, but it was still funny. And then that doesn't work. So then he takes a plastic Christmas tree star topper, and then he slashes his throat with it like it's a knife, and it works, and it kills him. Right? And then it's really funny because as he's like I guess skedaddling out, and then the kids they walk out of their room and they smile at him because it's Santa, right? They're really happy that Santa's here. And then the wife, like his woman, like the guy's wife screams, and then he runs out the door. But then the thing is, one thing I love is the kids do love him, right? They genuinely think he's Santa, right? They don't want them to hurt Santa. You know, so there was a point where like an angry mob recognized him, that they were like a bunch of these kids, and they were like shielding him from their parents. And this dude got a switchblade, and he was gonna switchblade Santa, right? But then eventually the guy's daughter like was fighting him, and she wrestled away his knife, and she gave it to Santa, and she had a stupid little smile on her face. She's like, yeah, I gave Santa the knife. It would have been really funny if I thought she was gonna stab her dad for Santa. I thought that would have been really funny, but that didn't happen. And that's like a thing. And then he goes to his little brother's house, who I mentioned earlier, and he's essentially like, then they get into an argument, and he starts choking him, right? The little brother starts choking Harry, Santa, And he's like, you're blaming like everything you did, you're blaming on me for something I said when I was 6 years old. And it's just like, he's not wrong. But it's just really funny the way he was saying it. And then he thought he choked him to death, and then it's really goofy because he's like dragging Santa Claus's corpse out of his room and into the van. And then there's, like, the two kids looking out the window. And I do think it's kind of like a loop thing. Like, one of them is probably also going to end up like Harry, because that's similar to what happened to Harry when he was younger, right? So that could happen to them. But yeah, that was the setup for Christmas Evil 2. Those kids could have, had the same dynamic that Harry and his brother had. But there was no Christmas Evil 2. I know this whole experience soured you on the film industry, Lewis Jackson. And I know you're probably never going to make another movie because it's been a long time, but it would be nice. Either way, you think he's dead, but then he's not, right? And the brother, it looks like he regretted it. It seems like it was in the heat of the moment and he didn't want to, he thought he killed his brother and he was, torn up about it. He didn't like it. But then it wasn't dead. And then, Harry was just staring at him. And then he went like this. And it looked like he was going to pull something out. And then it just cut to, to the brother. And then he just went, psh, and he just punched him in the face and drove away. And it was really funny because they added, a fucking Three Stooges, Looney Tunes sound effect when he punched him in the face. It was like, BOW! Like a Batman 1960s sound effect. And then he drove off. That was the funniest thing in the movie because you thought, he was going to pull out a weapon or something. But no, he just charged up a punch. Like he was in, a fighting game or something. He had to charge it up. Right? It was really funny. And then the end of the movie, of course, he's getting chased by an angry mob with torches, and his brother's trying to, chase the van, trying to, I guess convince him to not do whatever he's gonna do. And then, of course, he drives off a bridge, right? And the end of the movie, he's flying away into the moon. He's flying on his van, but in reality, he probably crashed and died, right? Because he's delusional, and he thought he was Santa Claus, genuinely. And that was a pretty fitting ending. It was a little abrupt, right? It was kind of really abrupt. It just kind of, it was there and then it ended, right? It didn't really feel like a good build-up. However, with that being said, I think the film was very enjoyable. Now, I still do think the first half did have a bit, weird pacing, and I think there were some little things here and there. I think, although I did like the dialogue, I think it still felt weird, and maybe a good and bad weird, it's hard to describe, because, it didn't feel like real people talking, but that's, a good thing, because, it's not really supposed to, I don't think. The film is just weird, right? And that, I think, genuinely, it's kind of it's an acquired taste, I guess is a good way to put it. And I enjoyed it, though. And would I recommend it? I think it depends. Now, if you're a fan of non-traditional Christmas films, and if you're okay with, these Yuletide holiday films going out of the norm, if you're okay with that, I think you could get a lot of enjoyment out of that. But if you're more of a traditional Christmas film fan, It's a Wonderful Life, Miracle on 34th Street, Home Alone, the classics, it's not like those at all, right? And it's a horror movie, so... And if you're one of those people that are horror movies, it, taints the spirit of Christmas, stuff like that, you're probably not going to get a lot of enjoyment out of this film. But if you're okay with that, I think there's a lot of enjoyment for this film to be had. There's a lot of enjoyment to be had. And with that being said, what would I rate this film? I think I'd rate this film a 7.5 out of 10. And, yeah. I think I've said what I need to say. I think I've said my piece. So guys, I hope you like this video. Share it with friends. Subscribe, turn those notifications on. Comment down below if you liked it. And I've been Tom HD. Off to bring back the Christmas spirit. So I was watching this film, and I watched a little bit of the director's commentary after the film. And it had the director, Lewis Jackson, but it also had John Waters. And that commentaries where he said he thinks it's the greatest Christmas film ever made. But he also said something interesting that I hadn't really considered when I was watching the film. And he said that the film was kind of like a trans film, because, but instead of a man transitioning into a woman, it was about, or like a woman transitioning into a man, it was about a man transitioning into Santa Claus. Because it's not like he was trying to like trick people into thinking he was Santa, or like trying to play Santa. He genuinely believed that he was Santa, right? And he wanted everyone to know that he was Santa, right? And he was going to bring back the Yuletide spirit, and he wanted to, give the kids presents and stuff. He genuinely thought he was Santa. And when you think about it that way, it was kind of ahead of its time.